For 33 years, my mother told me I wasn't real family. She said it with a tight smile, usually right before ensuring I got the smallest slice of everything. I accepted my place as the outsider until my father died, and I found a 25-year-old trust buried in a forgotten lockbox. It turned out she was right. I wasn't just family. I was the safeguard she had been terrified of for decades. The crystal stemware caught the light of the chandelier, shattering it into tiny, blinding spectrums across the linen tablecloth. It was the sort of dinner party my mother, Eleanor, lived for. 12 guests, all vetted for net worth and social standing, seated around the mahogany table that had been in her family for 3 generations. I sat at the far end, near the kitchen door, the spot usually reserved for the person expected to get up and refill the water pitchers. I was 33 years old, yet in this house, I was perpetually 12, awkward, and taking up space I had not earned. The conversation had turned, as it often did, to lineage. A cousin from my mother's side was boasting about a genealogy project, tracing the Hendersons back to the Mayflower or some minor nobility in France. "And where do you fit in, Vivian?" the cousin asked, turning to me with a wine-flushed smile. "You have the Henderson nose, I think." The table went quiet. It was a micro-silence, the kind that only happens when a collective breath is held. My mother laughed. It was a tinkling, practice sound, like ice hitting the side of a glass. "Oh, don't try to pin Vivian down on a family tree," she said, waving a manicured hand. "We have always said Vivian is our little charity case. Not real family, you know, just someone we decided to keep around for the atmosphere." The table erupted in polite, uncertain laughter. My older sister, Claire, sitting at my mother's right hand, giggled and took a sip of her Pinot Grigio. "It is a running joke," she added, smoothing her silk napkin. "Vivian is the wild card." I sat there, frozen. My hand tightened around my fork until my knuckles turned white. I had heard variations of this phrase my entire life, not real family, usually whispered in the kitchen or sighed over a report card, but tonight she had said it into a microphone of silence, broadcasting it to the extended clan. I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber over a skull. "Good one, Mother," I said. My voice sounded thin, distant, as if it were coming from the next room. My father, Robert, did not laugh. He sat at the head of the table, staring into his soup. He looked gray, his skin possessing the texture of old parchment. He cleared his throat, a rough, wet sound, but he did not speak up. He never spoke up. He just reached for his wine glass, his hand trembling slightly, and took a long, heavy swallow. The dinner continued, rolling over me like a tide. I ceased to be a person and became a piece of furniture, something functional but easily ignored. When the coffee was served, I made my excuses, pleading a migraine, and slipped out the back door. The night air was cool, smelling of damp earth and the expensive mulch my mother had imported for the roses. I walked to my car, a sensible, 10-year-old sedan that looked like a blemish on the pristine driveway. Vivian. I turned. My father was standing on the porch steps. He looked smaller than I remembered, his tuxedo jacket hanging loose on his shoulders. He came down the stairs carefully, one hand gripping the railing. "Dad, you should be inside," I said. "Mom will be angry if the host is missing." He waved the comment away, coming to a stop a few feet from me. He smelled of scotch and that distinct, dusty scent of old books that always clung to him. He looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were watery and sad. "I am sorry about tonight," he said. His voice was a rasp. "She does not mean it. You know how she is when she has an audience. She means it." "Dad," I said, leaning against my car door. "She has always meant it." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He knew I was right. Instead of words, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his keyring. It was a chaotic jumble of brass and silver, keys to properties he owned, cars he drove, and offices he managed. He fumbled with the ring, his fingers stiff, until he worked a small silver key off the loop. "Here," he said, Pressing it into my palm, I looked at it. It was an ordinary key, the kind you might use for a padlock or a filing cabinet. It looked old, the metal worn smooth by years of thumb rubbing. "What is this for?" I asked. He looked back at the house, checking the windows. "Just take it. Vivian, keep it close, just in case." "In case of what?" He did not answer. He looked at me with a desperate intensity, as if he were trying to transmit a message without speaking the words. Then, the front door opened, and a slice of yellow light cut across the driveway. "Robert?" My mother's voice called out. "Robert, the Millers are leaving." He flinched. The mask of the obedient husband slid back into place. "I have to go," he whispered. He squeezed my shoulder, a clumsy, fleeting touch. "Drive safe, kiddo." He turned and walked back into the light, leaving me standing in the dark with a piece of cold metal burning a hole in my hand. 3 days later, the phone rang at 2 a.m. It is never good news at that hour. It is only ever death or disaster. It was Claire. Her voice was clipped, efficient. "It's Dad. Massive heart attack. We are at St. Jude's. You should probably come." She hung up before I could ask if he was alive. I drove to the hospital in a trance. The streets were empty, the traffic lights blinking yellow like warning eyes. When I arrived at the emergency waiting room, I found my mother and Claire standing near the nurses' station. They looked immaculate, even in crisis. My mother was wearing a crisp trench coat, her hair perfectly coiffed. Claire was texting on her phone. "Where is he?" I asked. Rushing up to them, "Can I see him?" My mother looked at me. Her eyes were dry. "He is gone." "Vivian, it happened in the ambulance." The world tilted. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, drilling into my temples. "Gone? But I just saw him. He was fine. He gave me—" "He is gone," Claire repeated, not looking up from her screen. "We are handling the paperwork now." I tried to push past them toward the double doors. "I need to see him. I need to say goodbye." My mother stepped in front of me. Her movement was smooth, like a gate closing. "That is not necessary," she said. "The doctors are preparing him for transport to the funeral home. It is not a pretty sight. Vivian, you do not have the constitution for it. I am his daughter," I snapped, my voice cracking. "Are you?" she said softly. The words hit me like a physical slap. I stared at her, stunned. Her face was composed, tragic even, but her eyes were cold granite. "Go home. Vivian," she said, "we have a lot of arrangements to make. You will just be in the way here." They turned their backs on me. I stood there for a moment, watching them speak to a doctor in low, hushed tones. I was a ghost. I was invisible. I wandered down the hallway, ignoring their instructions. I found a nurse who looked sympathetic and asked where my father's belongings were. She directed me to a plastic bag on a counter near the trauma room. "Family?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She handed me the bag. I opened it. His watch, his wallet, and his heavy wool coat, the charcoal one he wore everywhere in the winter. I pulled the coat out, burying my face in the collar. It smelled of him, scotch, paper, and the faint, sweet scent of pipe tobacco he hadn't smoked in 10 years. I put the coat on over my pajamas. It swallowed me whole. The sleeves hanging past my hands. It was a heavy, scratchy embrace. I walked out of the hospital without saying a word to my mother or sister. They did not notice I was leaving. The funeral was a masterpiece of logistics. It was held at the cathedral downtown, a cavernous space filled with lilies and black suits. My mother played the grieving widow to perfection, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief at the exact right moments. Claire stood beside her, the stoic pillar of strength. I sat in the front row, but separated from them by a discreet gap of 6 inches of pew. It felt like a canyon. During the service, I noticed a man standing near the side entrance. He did not look like the other mourners. He was wearing a suit that was expensive but ill-fitting, and he was clutching a briefcase to his chest like a shield. He kept glancing at my mother, then at the coffin, then at his watch. After the eulogy, delivered by a business partner who spoke mostly about my father's investment strategies. I watched the strange man approach my mother. They spoke for less than 10 seconds. She nodded, took a folder from him, and signed a document right there, on the edge of the baptismal font. It happened so fast I almost missed it. Who signs legal papers at a funeral? I tried to make my way to them, but a wall of well-wishers blocked me. By the time I reached the front, the man was gone. At the reception back at the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. I tried to go to the table where the condolence cards were piled, wanting to read the messages from his old friends, but Claire was already there. She was sweeping the envelopes into a large tote bag. "I will take those," she said, clutching the bag. "We need to log the donations for the thank you notes. I just wanted to read them." "Claire, later," she said. "Mom is exhausted. We are shutting this down early." After the guests left, the silence in the house was heavy. I went into the kitchen to help clean up, but the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, gently took the sponge out of my hand. "Your mother said you are to go home." "Miss Vivian," she whispered. Looking over her shoulder, I walked into the living room. My mother was sitting in her high-backed armchair, sipping a brandy. Claire was standing by the fireplace, scrolling on her tablet. "Is there anything you need help with?" I asked. "The estate? The will?" My mother didn't look up. "No, Vivian. Everything is in hand. We have excellent lawyers. There is no need for your input." "Right," I said. I felt a sudden, crushing exhaustion. "Well, I will head out then. I will come by tomorrow to check on you." "That won't be necessary," Claire said. She walked over to me, her hand extended. "Actually, Viv, do you have your key to the house?" "My key?" "Yeah. We are updating the security system. Insurance requirement. I need all the old sets back." I hesitated. I reached into my purse and pulled out my house key, the one I had carried since I was 16. I dropped it into Claire's palm. "Thanks," she said. She didn't offer a new one. I walked to the front door. I tried the handle, but it felt stiff. "Oh," Claire called out from the living room. "Don't bother trying to let yourself back in tomorrow. We already changed the cylinders this morning." I froze. They had changed the locks while his body was still being lowered into the ground. I walked out to my car, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. I did not cry. I was past crying. I felt hollowed out, scooped clean of emotion. My apartment was cold. I hadn't adjusted the thermostat in days. I threw my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the sofa. Still wearing my father's oversized wool coat, I wrapped the coat tighter around me, seeking comfort in the rough fabric. My hand brushed against something stiff in the inner breast pocket. I frowned. I reached inside and pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed, the paper slightly yellowed with age. There was no stamp. On the front, in my father's cramped, spidery handwriting, was an address. Sterling, Haynes O'Malley, Attorneys at Law. The date written in the corner was from 25 years ago. I stared at it. Why was my father walking around with a 25-year-old letter in his coat pocket? Had he been carrying it the night he died? Or had it been there for decades? Forgotten? I tore it open. Inside, there was no letter, just a single business card stapled to a larger, folded document. The document looked legal, dense with text, but I couldn't read it yet. My eyes went to the business card. Arthur Sterling, Esquire. I grabbed my phone and typed the name of the firm into the search bar. Sterling, Haynes O'Malley. Nothing current, just an archival listing, merged into Davis White, 2008. I dialed the number listed for the old firm, hoping for a redirect. It rang 3 times, then clicked over to a generic robotic voice. "The number you have reached is no longer in service. For the offices of Davis White, please hang up and dial." I hung up. I sat there in the silence, my heart hammering a strange, uneven rhythm. This wasn't an accident. You don't carry a letter for 25 years by accident. You carry it because you are waiting for the right moment to use it, or because you are afraid to. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Not real family." And then, the quick signature at the funeral, the changed locks, the rush to get me out of the house. A spark flared in my chest. It wasn't grief. It was hotter than grief. It was anger. They didn't just exclude me because they didn't like me. They excluded me because they were hiding something. They had planned for this moment. They had been ready. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't a Henderson. I called Sarah. She was my only real friend, a paralegal who had known me since college. I met her at a dive bar halfway between our apartments. I showed her the envelope. I told her about the locks, the funeral, the signing. "Viv," she said gently, swirling her wine. "I have to ask. I have always wondered, is it possible? Is what possible? That you are adopted?" I flinched. "No, absolutely not. How do you know? Have you ever seen your birth certificate? Like, the actual long-form one?" "Of course I have." She looked at me over the rim of her glass. Her eyes were kind but skeptical. "Look, families get weird about money, but this, the not real family thing, the changing of the locks immediately, that screams legal panic. If you were adopted and there was no will, or a specific will, they might be trying to freeze you out of an inheritance. It is not that," I said, shaking my head. I denied it immediately, not because I was sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but because the idea was too painful. If I was adopted, then every cruel joke, every exclusion, every cold shoulder wasn't just meanness, it was the truth, and I couldn't handle that being the truth. "Not tonight. It is something else," I said. "My father gave me a key." Sarah frowned. "What key?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver key he had given me in the driveway. "This one," he said, "just in case." She took it, examining the teeth. "This is a terrifyingly generic key." "Viv, it could be for a diary or a gym locker." "No," I said, a memory surfacing through the fog of grief. "Not a gym locker." I took the key back and stood up. "I have to go." "Where?" "My basement." I lived in an older building, a pre-war structure that still had a dedicated storage room in the basement for tenants. It was a dusty concrete bunker filled with chicken wire cages. When I first moved in 5 years ago, my father had insisted on paying for a secure lockbox in the building's vault room, a relic from when the building was a bank in the 1920s. He had said it was for my passport and lease papers. I had laughed at him for being paranoid, thrown the paperwork in there, and forgotten about it. I hadn't opened it in years. I stood before the wall of small metal doors. Box 402. My hand was shaking as I slid the small silver key into the slot. It fit perfectly. I turned it. The mechanism clicked, a heavy, satisfying sound of well-oiled steel. I pulled the box out. It was long and narrow, smelling of cold metal. Inside, there was my passport, my lease, and beneath them, a thick stack of papers I had never seen before. I lifted the stack. It was heavy. The top page was a photocopy. The header was bold, typed in an old-fashioned serif font. Irrevocable trust, established 25 years prior. My breath hitched. 25 years. I was 8 years old. I flipped through the pages. It was dense legalese, grantor, beneficiary, trustees. I scanned for names. My father's name was there as the grantor, but where the beneficiary's name should have been. The text was dense, citing the child repeatedly. I turned to the final page, looking for the signature block, looking for the definition of the child. The page ended abruptly. The bottom third of the final page had been torn off, not cut, torn. The edge was jagged, running right along the staple line. I stared at the ragged paper. Someone had been here. Someone had used this key, or a copy of it, and physically ripped the most important part of the document out of the file. This wasn't a forgotten backup. This was a crime scene. My father hadn't just given me a key to a box. He had given me the starting gun for a war. I looked at the date on the header again. 25 years ago. My mother was right. I wasn't family. I was something else entirely. I was a liability they had been managing for 3 decades, and now, the management phase was over. I shoved the papers into my coat pocket, my father's coat pocket, and closed the box with a slam that echoed through the empty basement. I wasn't numb anymore. I was awake. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Davis White building with a glare that felt personal. It was a skyscraper of steel and intimidation, standing in the financial district like a sentinel. This was where the ghost of Sterling, Haynes O'Malley, had gone to live after the merger. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching the revolving doors swallow people in expensive suits and spit them back out. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my palms were damp. I was wearing my best blazer, the one I usually saved for client meetings at the marketing firm where I worked, but against the backdrop of this place, it felt cheap. I checked the envelope in my purse one last time. The address was right. The firm was right. The question was whether I was right. I walked into the lobby. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested money didn't sweat. I approached the reception desk, a slab of white marble manned by a woman who looked like she had been sculpted from the same material. "I am here to see someone regarding a trust managed by the former firm of Sterling, Haynes O'Malley," I said. My voice was steady, surprising me. She didn't look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, then raised her eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have documentation." She sighed, a tiny release of air through her nose, and picked up a phone. I waited. I watched the people passing by. They all looked like they belonged. They all looked like real family. 5 minutes later, I was not ushered into a corner office with a view. I was led to a small, windowless conference room on the 14th floor. A woman entered a moment later. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with steel gray hair cut into a severe bob and glasses on a chain around her neck. She introduced herself as Mrs. Vance, a senior paralegal. She did not offer me coffee. "I understand you are inquiring about a legacy file," she said, sitting down and folding her hands on the table. "We absorbed thousands of files during the merger. Most are archived in deep storage." I pulled the photocopy from my bag, the one from the lockbox, and slid it across the polished wood. "This is not a legacy file," I said. "It is an active trust. My father, Robert Henderson, passed away 4 days ago." Mrs. Vance picked up the paper. Her expression was bored, bureaucratic. She adjusted her glasses and scanned the header. Then her eyes stopped. She read the first paragraph, then the second. The boredom evaporated, replaced by a sharp professional caution. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "My father left it for me." She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, "I need to see identification, driver's license and birth certificate. If you have it." I handed them over. I had brought everything. She looked at the license, then she unfolded the birth certificate. Her eyes darted from the date on the certificate to the date on the trust document. I saw the calculation happen in her head. I saw the moment the math clicked. My birth date, October 14th, 1991. The trust creation date, October 16th, 1991. 2 days. The trust had been established 48 hours after I was born. Mrs. Vance slowly pushed the documents back toward me. She took off her glasses. "Ms. Henderson," she said, choosing her words with agonizing care. "I can confirm that this firm holds the original instrument for an irrevocable trust established by Robert Henderson. However, I cannot discuss the specific assets or the current valuation with you at this time." "Why not?" I asked. "I am the beneficiary." She hesitated. "The trust language is complex. It was drafted with a dual trigger mechanism." "A what?" "A trigger clause," she explained. "It means the trust does not simply activate upon the grantor's death. That is the first condition. But there is a second condition that must be met before the assets are released or even fully disclosed to the beneficiary." "What is the second condition?" I demanded. She shook her head. "I cannot say. You cannot say. Or you won't say?" "I cannot," she said firmly. "The terms of the trust are strict. Until the second condition is triggered, the trust remains in a state of, let us call it, dormancy. It exists, but it is asleep." I leaned forward. "My father is dead." Mrs. Vance. My mother and sister have locked me out of the family home. They are erasing me. If this trust was meant to help me, it needs to wake up now. Mrs. Vance's face softened. Just a fraction. It was a crack in the armor. She looked down at the file again, then back at me. I will tell you this, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The trust was not just about money. It was designed for protection. The language. It is very specific about shielding the beneficiary from undue influence and hostile familial actors. Hostile familial actors. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't standard legal boilerplate. It was a description. It was a portrait of my life. Go home, Ms. Henderson, Mrs. Vance said. Standing up, we will be in touch if the status changes. But be careful. If you have a copy of this, then I assume others know it exists. And if they know it exists, they know what it can do. I walked out of the building feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I wasn't crazy. Heavier because I was right. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed. Mom calling. I stared at the screen. We hadn't spoken since the funeral reception when she told me my help wasn't needed. My thumb hovered over the decline button. But a morbid curiosity took over. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to hear if she sounded afraid. I answered, "Hello, Mother, Vivian," she said. There was no greeting. No, "How are you?" Her voice was calm, unnervingly calm. It sounded like she was reading from a script she had memorized years ago. "I heard you went into the city today," she said. My stomach dropped. How did she know? I hadn't told anyone but Sarah. I had some errands. I said, "Don't lie to me. Vivian, it is beneath you. You went to Davis and White." I stopped walking. I was standing in the middle of the sidewalk. People streaming around me. "Are you following me?" I asked. She laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. "I don't need to follow you. You are not that hard to predict. You always get obsessive when you are emotional." I waited. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to fill it. "Stop digging." "Vivian," she said finally. The tone wasn't angry. It was almost bored. "You are looking for something that isn't there. You are going to embarrass yourself. And frankly, you are going to embarrass the memory of your father. He left me a key." "Mother, he left you a trinket," she snapped, the mask slipping for a millisecond before she recovered. "He was a sentimental man. He kept old movie tickets and broken watches. That key opens nothing of value. Then why did you change the locks on the house?" "Because we are grieving," she said. "Because we need privacy. Because having you wandering around, touching things, asking questions, it is disruptive. You are disrupting our healing. Not mine, hers and Claire's. I am not going to stop." I said. There was a pause on the line. A long, cold pause. Then she spoke, her voice dropping an octave. "Vivian, listen to me. There are things you don't know, things we have kept from you to protect you. If you keep pulling at this thread, you are not going to find a pot of gold. You are going to find out exactly why you have always felt like you didn't belong. And once you know that, you can never unknow it. Is that a threat? It is advice. Go back to your apartment. Go back to your job. Let the lawyers handle the estate. You will get a check eventually. A nice, modest check. Don't let greed ruin the only family you have left." She hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone. It wasn't the words that scared me. It was the lack of heat in them. She wasn't fighting me like an enemy. She was managing me like a problem. 20 minutes later, a text came through. It was from Claire. No text, just an image. I opened it. It was a photo from when we were children. I must have been 10. Claire 14. We were sitting on the dock at the lake house we used to rent in the summers. Claire was braiding my hair. The sun was setting behind us, bathing everything in a golden, nostalgic haze. It looked beautiful. It looked like love. Then I read the caption underneath. "Remember who kept you." I stared at the words. Kept, not raised, not loved. Kept like a secret, like a receipt, like a pet that you didn't really want but felt too guilty to take to the shelter. The manipulation was so subtle it was almost elegant. She was using a moment of intimacy to remind me of my debt. The implication was clear. We took you in. We fed you. We clothed you. You owe us your silence. I deleted the text, but I couldn't delete the feeling. It felt like slime on my skin. I needed to see the house. I knew I couldn't get in. I knew the locks were changed. But I needed to see the physical structure of my childhood. I needed to see the fortress they were defending. I drove out to the suburbs. The Henderson estate was a sprawling colonial set back from the road, surrounded by oaks that were older than the country. I parked my car down the street, near the neighbor's driveway, and walked the rest of the way. The house was dark. My mother's car was in the driveway, but Claire's was gone. I walked up the long driveway. The gravel crunched under my feet, the sound echoing in the quiet afternoon. I walked up to the front door. I took out my old key. I knew it wouldn't work, but I had to try. I slid it into the lock. It went in halfway and hit a wall, blocked. I walked around the side of the house, keeping to the shadows of the rhododendrons. I went to the library window, the one where my father used to sit and read for hours. The curtains were drawn, but there was a sliver of a gap. I pressed my face against the glass. The library was in chaos. Books were pulled off the shelves and stacked in erratic piles. But it was the hallway beyond that stopped my heart. Lined up against the wall were cardboard boxes, at least a dozen of them. They were sealed with packing tape, and on the side of each one, written in Claire's sharp, angular marker strokes, was a single word: donation. I squinted. The box closest to the window had the top flaps partially open. Sticking out of the top was a patch of purple fur. It was Mr. Hoot, my stuffed owl, the one I had slept with until I was 12, the one my father had bought me at a carnival when I had scraped my knee and wouldn't stop crying. He had told me Mr. Hoot would watch over me while I slept, so I never had to be scared of the dark. I had left him on the top shelf of my old closet, safe. Now he was trash. They weren't just locking me out. They were purging me. They were scrubbing the house of any evidence that Vivian Henderson had ever lived there. It was an exorcism. I backed away from the window, my breath hitching in my throat. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about decluttering. It was a message. You are gone. You were never really here. I didn't go home. I went to the county clerk's office. If they were moving this fast to throw out my toys, what were they doing with the real assets? The clerk's office was a drab room smelling of floor wax and bureaucracy. I filled out a request form for the property deeds on 44 Elm Street. The clerk, a bored teenager chewing gum, handed me a printout 10 minutes later. I took it to a plastic table in the corner and sat down. I traced the history of the house. 1985. Purchased by Robert and Eleanor Henderson. 1995. Refinanced. 2015. Transfer of deed. I stopped. 2015. That was 10 years ago. The owner listed wasn't Robert Henderson. It wasn't Eleanor Henderson. It was Greenwood Holdings. LLC? I frowned. I had never heard of Greenwood Holdings. My father had always spoken about the house as if it were his pride and joy, his personal legacy. The Henderson House, he called it. But for the last decade, he had been paying rent to a shell company. I pulled out my phone and searched the state business registry for Greenwood Holdings, LLC. The registered agent was a lawyer I didn't know, but the managing member address. The address was a P.O. box in a town 3 hours away, a town where my mother's sister, Aunt Lydia, lived. My mother hadn't just changed the locks yesterday. She had moved the house out of my father's name 10 years ago. She had put it into a box where, presumably, she held the key. This wasn't panic. This was a long con. I called the law firm again. I didn't ask for Mrs. Vance. I asked for the records department. I used a voice I had cultivated in my professional life. Firm, impatient, entitled. I am following up on the request for the Henderson Trust language. I said, my attorney needs the specific verbiage regarding the purpose clause immediately. The junior clerk on the phone, flustered, didn't check my credentials. He just opened the file. I can read that to you. Ma'am. He stammered. Section 4, Paragraph A. The primary purpose of this trust is to provide support, stability, and protection for the beneficiary against any and all external liabilities, including but not limited to familial disputes and reputational harm. And the beneficiary? I asked, holding my breath. One moment, he said. He scrolled. It just says, "Oh, that is weird. What?" "The name is redacted in this digital view," he said. "It just says the child in the body text. But there is a reference note here. See Schedule B for identity confirmation." "Read me Schedule B." "I can't access that," he said. "It is locked. Only a partner can open it." I hung up. Support, stability, and protection. Protection against familial disputes. My father knew. 25 years ago. He knew. He knew my mother would do this. He knew I would be the outsider. He had built a financial bunker for me because he knew he wouldn't be there to stand in front of the bullets. I was driving back to my apartment when my phone rang again. An unknown number. I answered warily. "Hello? Vivian? Is that you?" The voice was crackly. Older. "Yes. Who is this?" "It is Martha Higgins. From the old neighborhood. Before you moved to the big house on Elm." Martha Higgins. I searched my memory. A vague image of a woman with a beehive hairdo and a plate of cookies appeared. She had lived next door to us when I was very small, in the starter home my parents had before my father's business took off. "Mrs. Higgins." I said, surprised. "I haven't seen you in decades." "Dear," she said. "I saw the obituary. I'm so sorry about your father. Robert was a good man, a quiet man, but good." "Thank you." I said. I hesitated to call. She went on. "But I saw your mother at the funeral service. I didn't go in. I just watched from the back. She looks exactly the same. Ice Queen. We used to call her." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You are not wrong, Vivian," she said, her voice dropping. "There is something that has always bothered me. And now that Robert is gone, I feel like I should say it. What is it? You know, when you folks first moved into that little house on Maple Street, this was before you were born, right after they got married. Your mother didn't go by Mrs. Henderson." "What do you mean?" "I mean, on the mailbox, it said Henderson and Vance." "Vance?" I asked. "That wasn't her maiden name." "Her maiden name was Talbot." "No, dear, Vance. She used it for about 6 months. Then one day, the mailman stopped bringing letters for Vance, and she was just Mrs. Henderson. I asked her about it once, over the fence. She looked at me like I was a bug and said it was a clerical error. But it wasn't an error, Vivian. She got letters with that name, official-looking ones. Vance." The name echoed in my head. Why did that sound familiar? Then it hit me. The paralegal, the woman at Davis White, Mrs. Vance. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Was it a coincidence? Vance was a common name, but in a story like this, where locks were changed and names were redacted, there were no coincidences. "Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Higgins," I said. "You take care of yourself." "Honey," she said, "that family. They always had too many closets for the size of the house. If you know what I mean." I needed to go back to the basement. I felt like I was losing my mind. Names were shifting. Timelines were blurring. I ran down the stairs to the storage room. Ignoring the elevator, I unlocked box 402. I took everything out this time. I turned the metal box upside down and shook it. A small, flat object fell out from where it had been wedged between the metal bottom and the back wall. It was a hospital bracelet. The plastic was yellowed and brittle. I picked it up. Baby Girl Henderson. D.O.B. October 14th, 1991. Mother. Eleanor Henderson. I stared at it. It seemed normal. It confirmed I was their child. It confirmed the date. But then I turned it over. On the inside of the plastic band, written in permanent marker that had faded to a ghostly gray, was a single letter, A, just the letter A, and underneath the bracelet, stuck to the bottom of the box, was a scrap of paper. It was torn from a yellow legal pad. The handwriting was my father's. Rushed. Messy. Frantic. Vivian, you were never the mistake. The trust is the only way I can make it right. Don't let them tell you otherwise. You are the only one who is innocent in this. R. I held the note in my hand. My thumb traced the ink. You were never the mistake. My mother had spent 33 years making me feel like an error, a glitch in her perfect life. But my father was saying the opposite. He was saying he was the one who had messed up. And the trust wasn't just money, it was an apology. It was a shield he had forged in the fire of his own guilt. I looked at the bracelet again. Baby girl Henderson. If I was baby girl Henderson, why did I feel like I was reading the evidence of a stranger? And who was Vance? I put the papers back in the box, but I kept the note and the bracelet. I put them in my pocket, right next to the trust document. I wasn't just digging anymore. I was excavating, and I was starting to realize that the foundation of the Henderson family wasn't built on rock. It was built on a graveyard. I walked out of the basement. The fear was gone. It had burned away, leaving something colder and harder in its place. My mother wanted a fight? She wanted to erase me? She was about to find out that you can't erase something that was written in ink 25 years ago. I took out my phone and dialed Sarah. I need a forensic accountant, I said when she answered, and I need a private investigator. What happened? She asked. I found the first brick, I said, and I am going to pull it out and watch the whole house fall down. My living room wall had become a crime scene board. I had pushed the sofa to the center of the room and taped sheets of printer paper together to form a timeline that spanned 3 decades. I stood back, holding a mug of cold coffee, and looked at the years written in black marker. 1991, the year of the explosion. October 14th. I am born. October 16th. The trust is created. November. My mother briefly uses the name Vance on mail at the old house. Then, a gap. 1995. I closed my eyes, trying to force a memory from the static of early childhood. I had a vague, hazy image of a blue room. Boxes. My mother crying. Not sad crying, but angry crying. The sound of slamming doors. We moved that year. We left the starter home Mrs. Higgins had talked about and moved into the sprawling estate on Elm Street. Why move so abruptly? My father's business was doing well, but the upgrade was massive. It was a leap from middle class to the kind of wealth that requires gates. I uncapped the marker and wrote under 1995, the move/the shift in status. I looked at the timeline. The trust wasn't just a savings account, it was a reaction. Something happened in 1991 that scared my father enough to lock away assets for a child who was 2 days old. And something happened in 1995 that made them run to a fortress. I went back to the stack of papers from the lockbox. I had read the trust document a dozen times, but I had ignored the other loose papers, assuming they were just legal filler. I picked up a manila envelope I had missed earlier. It was thin, tucked between 2 thick deed photocopies, on the front, in my father's handwriting. Vivian, when you are ready. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned the envelope over. The flap was sealed with clear Scotch tape, but underneath the clear tape, the paper was rough and torn. There was a residue of old, yellowed glue. It had been opened, and then resealed. I didn't need a detective to tell me who had done it. My mother's curiosity was only matched by her need for control. She had found this, read it, and decided it was too dangerous to destroy but too important to leave unmonitored. Or perhaps she had resealed it to gaslight me, to make me think I was receiving a pristine message when I was actually getting leftovers. I sliced the tape with a letter opener. Inside, there were 3 sheets of legal pad paper, but the top edge of the first sheet was jagged. Page 1 was missing. I pulled out what remained. The handwriting was shaky, different from the firm. Confident script I saw on his business checks. This was written by a man who was drinking, or weeping, or both. Cannot undo the damage of the first years. I thought I could manage it. I thought if I just paid the price, everyone would stay in their corners. But Eleanor is afraid. She thinks a claim is coming. She thinks they will come for the house. For the accounts. For you. You need to understand that the trust is not an inheritance. Vivian, it is a wall. I built it so that if the worst happens, if the truth comes out and the courts get involved, you have something that is yours, untouchable, separate from the Henderson estate. She tells me I'm being paranoid. She tells me the problem is handled. But I look at you sleeping in your crib, and I know that nothing is ever truly handled. The past is just waiting for the check to bounce. If you are reading this, I am gone. And if I am gone, the buffer is gone. You need to trigger the sentence ended there. The third page was gone. I stared at the paper. A claim. The problem is handled. The past is waiting for the check to bounce. This wasn't about adoption. You don't build a legal wall to protect an adopted child from a claim. You do that to protect a child who exists in a legal gray area, or a child who is evidence of something that could destroy a reputation. I grabbed my keys. I was done with timelines. I needed to look the enemy in the eye. My mother was not at the house. I knew her schedule better than I knew my own cycles. It was Tuesday, 11 in the morning. She would be at the club, sitting on the terrace, holding court with the other widows and wives of the local gentry. I drove to the country club. The guard at the gate hesitated when he saw my car. It wasn't on the approved list anymore, apparently, but I stared him down. I am here to see my mother, Eleanor Henderson. I said, do not make me call her down here. He lifted the gate. I found her exactly where I expected. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf, sipping an iced tea. Claire was there too, looking like a younger, sharper copy of her, thumbing through a magazine. They didn't see me until I pulled out the metal chair opposite them and sat down. The screech of the legs on the stone patio made half the terrace turn and look. Vivian, Claire hissed, dropping her magazine. What are you doing here? You look manic. Hello. Mother, I said, ignoring my sister. Eleanor lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were cool, assessing. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like I was a fly that had landed on her lunch. I told you to stop digging, she said. I found the letter. I said, the one Dad wrote, the one you opened and resealed. She didn't flinch. You will have to be more specific. Your father wrote many dramatic notes in his later years. The brandy made him sentimental. He wrote about a claim, I said, keeping my voice low but hard. He wrote about a claim against the family. He wrote that the trust was a wall. What did he mean? Mother? Who is coming for us? She sighed and signaled the waiter. Another iced tea for my daughter, she said. And bring the check. She turned back to me. You are reading the ramblings of a dying man. Vivian, your father was weak. We all loved him. But let us be honest. He was a man who let guilt write checks his reality couldn't cash. He was terrified of his own shadow. Guilt for what? I demanded. For being human. She said vaguely, for not being the perfect husband, for having distractions. Distractions. Was that what I was? A distraction? Is that why the trust dates back to my birth? I asked. Because I was a distraction? Claire laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. Oh my God. Vivian, are we back on the adoption thing? Do you really want to do this here? In front of Mrs. Gable and the committee? I want to know why my birth certificate has an amendment code on it. I lied. I hadn't seen the code yet, but I saw the flicker in my mother's eyes. A tiny, microscopic dilation of the pupils. I hit a nerve. There is no amendment, my mother said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You are my daughter. I gave birth to you. I have the stretch marks to prove it. But do not think that biology makes you special. You were a difficult pregnancy. And you have been a difficult child. You have always demanded more than your share of attention. She leaned in. Her perfume, Chanel and Cold Terror, filling the space between us. The trust is a standard estate planning tool. If your father wanted to give you a little nest egg, fine. But if you think that document gives you the right to interrogate me, you are mistaken. You are not the victim here. Vivian, you are the beneficiary of a life you did not earn. She stood up. We are leaving. Claire, Get the car. Claire scrambled up, shooting me a glare of pure venom. You are ruining everything, she whispered to me. Just stop. I watched them walk away. My mother's back was straight, her head held high, but I noticed something I hadn't seen before. She was walking fast, too fast. She wasn't dismissing me. She was fleeing. By the time I got back to my apartment, the social retaliation had begun. My phone was buzzing with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Claire had posted a photo. It was a black and white shot of the three of them, Mom, Dad, and Claire, laughing at a dinner party years ago. I wasn't in the frame. The caption read, "Navigating grief is a journey that reveals who stands with you." Mom and I are leaning on each other as we process the loss of the heart of our family. It is heartbreaking when some choose distance and drama over unity. But we send love to everyone, even those who have lost their way. Family First Grief Healing. It was a masterclass in weaponized passive aggression. She didn't name me, which meant if I complained, I would look paranoid. But everyone knew. The comments were already rolling in. So sorry you have to deal with extra stress right now. Claire, praying for your mom. Some people just don't understand loyalty. Stay strong. The true family sticks together. Then the direct messages started. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Vivian, I saw Claire's post. I hope you are okay. But maybe you should give your mom some space? She's really fragile right now. Hey Viv, heard there was a scene at the club. Not cool. Respect the dead. I threw my phone onto the couch. They were isolating me. They were painting a narrative where I was the unstable. Greedy daughter attacking the grieving widow. It was a preemptive strike. If I tried to go public with the trust or the secrets later, I would already be discredited. I would just be the drama that Claire had warned everyone about. I felt a wave of nausea. It was effective. It made me want to crawl into bed and hide. But then I looked at the timeline on the wall. I looked at the word Vance. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to get the receipts. The Department of Vital Records was a grim building downtown, smelling of floor wax and waiting. I had requested my birth certificate online before, the standard short-form copy you use for a passport. But today I wanted the vault copy, the long form, the one that showed everything. I waited at the window for 40 minutes. Finally, a clerk with tired eyes called my number. Vivian Henderson? Yes. She held a document in her hand, frowning slightly. I have your certified copy here, but I have to inform you, the system flagged a historic amendment. My heart stopped. What kind of amendment? She pointed to a small code in the bottom margin. See this? COR7. That usually indicates a correction of parentage or a legal name change executed by court order post-birth. Can I see the original? The one before the correction? She shook her head. In this state, once an amendment is sealed by adoption or parentage judgment, the original is impounded. You would need a court order to unseal it. So I was adopted? I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at the screen again. Not necessarily. Adoption usually triggers a different code. This looks more like a reissuance, like the parents listed on the original weren't the legal parents, or the name was changed to match a legitimation process. It happened in 1994. 1994. The year before the move. 3 years after I was born. So for 3 years, I was someone else? Or I belonged to someone else? I can't say, the clerk said, sliding the paper under the glass. But legally, this is your birth certificate now. I took the paper. My hands were shaking. 1994. The timeline was filling in. 1991. I am born. Trust is created. 1994. My identity is legally rewritten. 1995. We moved to the fortress. I wasn't just not real family. I was a legal construct, a problem that had been fixed with a court order. I needed a lawyer, not the family lawyer, not someone my mother could golf with. I found Elias Thorne. His office was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner, but his reviews online said he was a pit bull for the disinherited. He was a small man with a messy desk and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He looked at the trust photocopy. He looked at the birth certificate code. Then he leaned back in his squeaky chair and tented his fingers. "You are in a dangerous position, Ms. Henderson," he said. "Tell me something I don't know." "Okay, I will tell you this. This trust? It is not an ATM, it is a bunker." He tapped the paper. "I have seen these before. This language: support, stability, and protection from hostile familial actors. This is what we call a poison pill trust. It is designed to sit dormant until someone tries to screw you. What does that mean? It means your father expected your mother to cut you off. He knew he couldn't leave you money in his will because she would contest it. She would claim undue influence or mental incompetence. Wills are easy to break. Trusts are hard. Irrevocable trusts with independent trustees are nearly impossible. So why is the firm blocking me? Because they are scared of your mother," Thorne said bluntly. "Or rather, they are scared of the estate. The Henderson estate is probably a massive client. They don't want to activate a trust that declares war on their biggest paymaster. But they have to, right? It is the law." Thorne smiled, a thin, cynical expression. "The law is a suggestion until you have a judge enforce it. Right now, they are stalling. They are hoping you get discouraged and take a settlement. They are hoping the second condition never happens." "What is the second condition?" I asked. He shrugged. "Could be anything. Could be you reaching a certain age. Could be your mother remarrying. Could be the estate dropping below a certain value." He paused, looking at the papers again. "But here is the thing that worries me. Vivian, if I can call you Vivian, yes, your mother is smart. She knows this trust exists. She likely knows the terms better than you do. If she knows that the trust freezes assets or penalizes her for cutting you out, she is not going to wait for it to trigger. What will she do? She will drain the pool before the lifeguard shows up. She will liquidate. She will turn the real estate, the stocks, the bonds into cash, and she will move that cash into accounts that the trust can't touch, offshore or into LLCs, where she is the sole member. Can she do that? If she is the executor of your father's estate? Absolutely. She can claim she is diversifying or paying debts. By the time you get a court order to stop her, the money will be in the Cayman Islands. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. How do I stop her? "We file an injunction," Thorne said. "We sue for a full accounting. We make noise, but that takes time. And time is expensive. I don't have money. Mr. Thorne, I have a salary from a marketing job and an apartment lease I can barely afford." He looked at me. Then he looked at the trust document again. "I will take the case on contingency," he said. "Why?" "Because of this." He pointed to the torn page. "A man who writes a trust like this, with a clause that someone felt the need to rip out. That man hid a lot of money, and when we find it, I want 30%. Done," I said. I left Thorne's office feeling armed. I had a gladiator now, but I needed to know where the money was going. I went back to my apartment and did something my father had taught me when I was a teenager, and he was trying to explain the importance of balancing a checkbook. Follow the small numbers. Vivian, the big numbers are for show. The small numbers tell you where the habits are. I logged into an old joint account I had with my father. It was a student account from college that we had never closed. There was almost no money in it, but I had access to his linked external transfer history because he had sometimes transferred rent money to me from his main hub. I scrolled back. Years back, I found a recurring transfer, every month. On the first, $500 was sent to an account at a credit union I didn't recognize. First State Community Bank, $500. It was nothing to a man like Robert Henderson. It was pocket change, but it was consistent. Every month for 7 years. The description was always the same. Maintenance. Maintenance for what? A car? A boat? I called the First State Community Bank. I pretended to be his executive assistant. "I am trying to reconcile Mr. Henderson's accounts for the estate." I said, "I see a recurring payment of $500 to your bank. Can you confirm the recipient?" "I can't give you the account holder's name without a subpoena." The teller said, "But I can tell you it is a checking account." Not a loan payment, a person. He was sending money to a person, $500. The amount you send to a college student for groceries, or an old friend who is down on their luck, or a silence fee that is low enough to fly under the radar. I wrote it down on my timeline. The maintenance payments. 2 days later, the bomb dropped. I was at work, trying to focus on a slide deck for a client, when my phone pinged with an alert. It wasn't a text. It was a Zillow alert. I had set up an alert for the family home address years ago, mostly out of curiosity to see if the Zestimate went up. Status change. 44 Elm Street. I clicked it, my breath catching. Pending listing. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't for sale. I read closer. It wasn't a sale listing. It was a public record notice that Zillow had scraped. Notice of refinance/deed of trust recorded. I clicked through to the county recorder website. My fingers flying across the screen. There was a filing from yesterday. Greenwood Holdings, LLC, was taking out a $3 million loan against the equity of the house. $3 million. And the signatory on the loan documents? Eleanor Henderson, manager. She wasn't selling the house. That would be too public. That would alert the neighbors. She was mortgaging it to the hilt. She was pulling the cash out of the walls. I called Thorne immediately. She is doing it. I said, my voice rising. She is stripping the equity. She just filed for a $3 million cash-out refinance on the house. Thorne swore softly. She is moving faster than I thought. She is cashing out the chips. Why $3 million? I asked. Because that is likely the maximum she can get without triggering a commercial audit. He said, Vivian, listen to me. Once that loan funds, that money is liquid. She can wire it anywhere in the world in 10 minutes. How long do we have? If it was recorded yesterday, maybe 48 hours until funding. Maybe less. We have to stop it. I am drafting the emergency restraining order now. Thorne said, but we need a judge to sign it, and judges don't like to intervene in normal business transactions without proof of fraud. Proof of fraud? I screamed. She is stealing the inheritance. Technically, she is managing an LLC she controls, Thorne said calmly. We need to prove that the house belongs to the trust, or that the trust has a claim on it, but we don't have the unredacted trust schedule. I stared at the wall. The timeline, the torn letter, the claim my father feared. I have to find the missing page. I said, what? The missing page of the trust, the one in the lockbox, the one that was torn out. That page lists the assets. That page proves the house is mine. Vivian, Thorne said, that page is gone. Someone destroyed it. No, I said, a cold certainty settling over me. My mother is a hoarder of secrets. She doesn't destroy leverage. She keeps it. She kept the letter. She kept the Vance name. I know where it is. Where? The only place she feels safe. The only place she thinks I can't touch. I hung up. I knew where she kept the real paperwork. Not in the safe in the library. That was a decoy. She kept it in the pool house. In the cedar closet where she stored the off-season coats. The coats she never wore. I looked at the timeline one last time. 1991. Trust created. 1995. The move. The move happened because of the trust. The house was bought by the trust. I was sure of it. And now, 25 years later, my mother was trying to sell the house back to the bank before the trust could wake up and claim it. It was a race. She had the lawyers. She had the keys. She had the public sympathy, but I had the anger. And I had a key that didn't work on the front door, but might work on the pool house gate if the contractor hadn't changed that lock yet. I grabbed my coat. I am coming. Mother, I whispered to the empty room, and I am bringing the fire. The legal term for what we did was a motion to preserve assets, but it felt more like throwing a hand grenade into a funeral parlor. Elias Thorne, my attorney, filed it at 9 a.m. By 10:15, the reaction arrived. My phone didn't ring. It vibrated against the desk surface like a trapped insect. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail, my heart doing that familiar, jagged rhythm against my ribs. I waited for the notification, then pressed play on the recording. Vivian. Her voice was low, trembling with a rage so cold it burned. I just received a call from the bank. They have frozen the refinance application because of a pending litigation flag. She paused, and I could hear the sound of ice clinking in a glass. You are stealing grief for profit, she hissed. Your father is barely cold. And you are using his death to extort your own family. You are not just greedy. Vivian, you are sick. Do not come near the house. Do not contact your sister. If you want a war, you have found one. I saved the voicemail. Then I backed it up to the cloud. Then I emailed a copy to Elias. I stared at the phone. Stealing grief for profit. It was a brilliant line. It was the kind of thing she would say to the relatives to explain why I was being excommunicated. She was building a narrative where she was the martyr and I was the vulture. But vultures are patient, and they have excellent eyesight. 2 days later, Sarah called me. She sounded breathless. Viv, you need to come to Elm Street. Right now. I can't. I said, I am at work, and if I go there, my mother will call the police. You don't need to go on the property. Sarah said, just come to the curb. They are purging. Viv, it is all out on the street. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which was technically true. Considering my family was the emergency, and drove to the suburbs, I parked 2 blocks away and walked. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. The curb in front of the Henderson estate was lined with garbage bags and cardboard boxes. It looked like the aftermath of an eviction. The recycling trucks hadn't come yet, but the scavengers had. A pickup truck was already idling there, a man loading a perfectly good lamp into the bed. I ran. Hey, I shouted, that is mine. The man looked at me, shrugged, and tossed the lamp back onto the grass. He drove off. I stood before the pile. It wasn't just trash. It was my history. There were boxes of my high school textbooks, my old art supplies, the trophies I had won for debate team, the gold plastic figures snapped off the bases, my clothes, bags of them, smelling of the cedar closet and neglect. Sarah pulled up a minute later, jumping out of her car. Oh my God, she whispered, looking at the destruction. She kept the good china. I bet. She kept everything that had value to her, I said, picking up a sketchbook that had been torn in half. She is only throwing away the things that prove I lived here. We started sorting. We didn't have much time before the garbage truck or the rain came. We worked in a frenzy, throwing what I wanted to keep into Sarah's trunk. I opened a box labeled MISK papers, old. It was mostly junk mail and old school report cards, but at the bottom, sandwiched between a coloring book and a stack of National Geographics, was a photo album. It wasn't the official family album. It was a small, cheap plastic one, the kind you used to get free from the drugstore when you developed film. I flipped through it. Most of the photos were blurry landscapes or shots of the garden, but near the end, there was a picture that made me stop. It was a photo of me as a baby. I recognized the onesie, yellow with little ducks. I had seen photos of myself in it before, but the woman holding me wasn't my mother. She was younger. She had dark, curly hair and a smile that looked genuine, not practiced. She was sitting on a park bench, holding me tight against her chest, her cheek pressed against the top of my head. She looked relieved. I pulled the photo out of the plastic sleeve. On the back, written in blue ballpoint ink, was a date and a name, Sylvia and the baby, June, 1992, Sylvia. I didn't know a Sylvia. We didn't have an Aunt Sylvia. My mother didn't have friends named Sylvia. I showed it to Sarah. Does she look familiar to you? Sarah squinted. No, but look at her hand. I looked closer. On the woman's left hand, resting on my baby blanket, was a ring. Not a wedding ring, a class ring. Thick gold with a dark stone. It looks like a college ring, Sarah said. I pocketed the photo. We finished loading the car just as a black SUV turned into the driveway. My mother, I didn't stay to fight. I got into Sarah's passenger seat, and we drove away, leaving the rest of the garbage for the city to bury. I spent the night on the internet. Sylvia, Robert Henderson, 1992. It was a needle in a digital haystack. I searched for obituaries, marriage announcements, alumni records. Then I tried the charity angle. My father had been on the board of the local arts council for 20 years. I went to the public library's digital archive of the local newspaper. I searched for Arts Council Gala 1992. A PDF popped up. A grainy scan of the society page. There was a photo of the committee. My father was in the back row, looking young and handsome in his tuxedo, and standing in the front row, holding a program, was the woman from the photo. The curly hair, the smile. The caption read, Arts Council Junior Committee Chair, Sylvia Moore, with board member Robert Henderson. Sylvia Moore. I searched her name. She was a local landscape architect. She had died in 2005. Car accident. I stared at the screen. She was dead, but the connection was there. She wasn't just a stranger. She was a colleague. A friend? I looked at the date on the back of the photo again. June, 1992. I was 8 months old in that picture. Why was the junior committee chair holding Robert Henderson's baby on a park bench? Looking at her with that kind of intensity? And why was the photo in a box of trash instead of the family album? Because she wasn't part of the family narrative. She was part of the timeline I was trying to reconstruct. I printed the article and taped it to my wall, right under 1992. The meeting at Davis White was formal. This time, I wasn't met by a paralegal. Elias Thorne sat next to me. Across the table sat Mr. Sterling II, the son of the original partner, and a woman introduced as the trust administrator, Ms. Hightower. Ms. Hightower was terrifyingly neutral. She had a face that gave away nothing, a perfect poker player for high-stakes probate. We have reviewed your request for a full accounting, Ms. Hightower said. Her hands were folded on a thick file. We acknowledge that you are a named party in the Henderson Family Protection Trust. A named party? Elias asked, leaning forward. Is she the beneficiary or not? She is a beneficiary, Ms. Hightower corrected. The language of the trust is specific. Read it to us, Elias said. Ms. Hightower opened the file. She didn't hand us a copy. She read aloud. Upon the death of the grantor, the trust shall provide for the health, education, and maintenance of the child, herein defined as the primary issue of the grantor's lineage, subject to the conditions of Article 7, the child. Elias repeated. Singular, yes, Ms. Hightower said. But Mr. Henderson has 2 children, Elias said, Claire and Vivian. The trust does not name Claire Henderson. Ms. Hightower said. It refers only to the child, so it is Vivian. I said, I am the younger one, the one born right before the trust was signed. Ms. Hightower looked at me. Her eyes were sympathetic but guarded. Ms. Henderson. The definition of the child in the schedule you do not have a complete copy of, is tied to specific biological markers and legal acknowledgments. It is not as simple as pointing to the youngest daughter. What does that mean? I asked, my voice rising. Am I the child or not? You are a potential qualifier. She said, but the trust was written to protect a specific individual from specific circumstances, until the second condition is met, or until the estate settles the paternity ambiguity. The trust remains in a preservation phase. Paternity ambiguity. The room went silent. My mother had told me I wasn't real family. The birth certificate had an amendment code, and now the trust administrator was talking about paternity ambiguity. Ms. Hightower closed the folder. However, we are aware of the attempt to refinance the Elm Street property. We are monitoring the situation. Monitoring? Elias barked. You should be blocking it. That house is a trust asset. It is titled to Greenwood Holdings. Ms. Hightower said calmly, the trust has a lien on Greenwood Holdings, but we do not own the deed directly. It is a complex structure. We cannot simply seize the house without cause. Refinancing to drain the equity is cause. I said, not necessarily, she replied. Not if the manager of the LLC, your mother, claims the funds are for the benefit of the estate. She stood up. We will keep you informed. Ms. Henderson. But for now, the trust is watching. That is all we can do. I walked out of the office feeling like I had been punched in the gut. Paternity ambiguity. Was Robert Henderson not my father? Was that the secret? If he wasn't my father, why did he leave me a trust? Why did he write, "You were never the mistake"? Unless he was the mistake, unless he had claimed me when he shouldn't have. I was walking to the subway when my phone buzzed. Claire, coffee? Just us. Please, I shouldn't have gone. Elias would have told me not to go, but I needed to look her in the eye. I met her at a Starbucks halfway between our worlds. She looked tired. Her perfect makeup was cracking around the edges. She didn't order anything. She just slid a manila envelope across the table. "What is this?" I asked. "A peace offering," she said. I opened it. It was a check for $50,000, and underneath it, a legal document. Settlement and non-disclosure agreement. "Mom wants this to end," Claire said, her voice thin. "She is willing to give you this now. Cash, no waiting for probate, no fighting over the trust. You take this. You sign the NDA, and you walk away." 50,000? I laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. "You are trying to buy my entire life for $50,000? The house alone is worth $3 million. Claire, it is not about the money. Viv," she said, leaning in, "it is about belonging. If you sign this, we can go back to normal. You can come to Christmas. You can be family." "Real family?" I asked. She flinched. "Look, Mom is complicated, but she is escalating. If you don't take this, she is going to destroy you. She will ruin your reputation. She will drag you through the mud so deep you will never get clean." Is that a threat? It is a warning. I am trying to help you. I looked at the check. It was a bribe, a cheap, insulting bribe. And the NDA? I scanned the text. The undersigned agrees to never publicly discuss, disparage, or question the lineage, estate, or medical history of the Henderson family. Lineage and medical history. They weren't protecting money. They were protecting the secret of who I was. I slid the envelope back to her. "Keep it." I said, "I don't want your money, and I don't want your version of family." Claire's face hardened. She stood up, picking up the envelope. "You are making a mistake. Vivian, you think you are the hero of this story? You are just the grenade Dad threw into our lives to punish Mom. And grenades don't get happy endings. They just explode." The explosion happened 4 hours later. My phone started blowing up. Texts from my cousins. Emails from my aunt. "Vivian, I am so praying for you. Honey, please get help." I opened my email. There was a message from my mother. CC'd to the entire extended family. A list of over 50 people. Subject: a family prayer for Vivian. "Dearest family, it breaks my heart to write this, but we need your support, as many of you know. Vivian has been struggling deeply since Robert's passing. The grief has triggered a severe episode of mental instability. She has been hallucinating conversations, imagining conspiracies about money, and harassing the estate lawyers with frantic, paranoid demands. We believe she is having a breakdown. She has rejected our offers of help and financial support. Please, if she contacts you with wild stories about trusts or secrets, understand that this is the illness speaking, not our Vivian. We are working with professionals to get her the care she needs. But until then, we ask for your patience and your silence. Do not engage with her delusions. It only feeds the mania. With love and heavy hearts. Eleanor and Claire. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the email over and over. Hallucinating. Paranoid. Illness. She had just nuked my credibility. If I went to a cousin now and said, "There is a secret trust," they would look at me with pity and say, "Oh, honey, take your meds." I felt the tears prickling. Hot and fast. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone through the window, but I stopped. Do not engage with her delusions. It only feeds the mania. If I screamed, I was manic. If I fought back publicly, I was unstable. She had trapped me. The only way to prove I was sane was to remain terrifyingly calm. I put the phone down. I put on my running shoes. I walked. I walked for 3 hours, until my legs burned and the sun went down. I didn't listen to music. I just listened to the rhythm of my breath. In, out, in, out. I came home and opened a new notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time of the email. I transcribed the text. I wasn't going to react. I was going to document. I made an appointment with a therapist for the next day. Not because I was crazy, but because I needed a licensed professional to document that I wasn't. I needed a paper trail of sanity. I was done being the victim. I was the historian of my own war. The next morning, Elias called me. His voice was different, excited. "Vivian, come to the office. I found something." I sat in his office 20 minutes later. He had the trust photocopy spread out on his desk, the one with the missing page. "I was up all night reading case law on these specific trust structures," he said, "and I found a precedent involving Sterling, Haynes O'Malley from the 90s. They used a boilerplate clause in their protection trusts." "What kind of clause?" "It is called an anti-dissipation penalty," Elias said. "Basically, it says that if any acting trustee or guardian attempts to conceal, waste, or divert trust assets while the beneficiary is a minor or unaware of their rights, the trust doesn't just sue them. What does it do? It strips them of control. Immediately, it appoints a neutral fiduciary, a dictator trustee, who has total power to seize assets to make the trust whole, and it usually names the beneficiary as the successor controller if they are of age." I looked at the torn page. That is what was on the missing page. I whispered, "Exactly," Elias said. "The beneficiary designation, naming you, and the penalty clause. Your mother tore it out not just to hide your name, but to hide the weapon. She knew that if you saw that clause, you would know you could fire her from her own estate." "So how do we use it?" I asked. "We don't have the page. We don't need the page to prove the intent." Elias said, "We have the refinance attempt. That is a hostile action. We can argue that by attempting to strip the equity from the house, she has triggered the implied penalty clause. We serve notice." I said, "We serve notice to the bank." Elias said, "And to Greenwood Holdings. We tell them that if they fund that loan, they are complicit in a breach of trust, and we will sue the bank for the full amount." "Do it," I said. "We serve the papers at noon." Elias sent a courier to the bank's headquarters and to my mother's attorney. The notice was simple. Notice of adverse claim and breach of trust. It demanded an immediate halt to all financial transactions involving the Henderson estate and Greenwood Holdings. Citing the anti-dissipation precedent, it was a bluff. In a way, we didn't have the unredacted document, but the bank didn't know that. Banks are cowardly. They hate risk. At 4 o'clock, Elias called me. "The bank folded," he said, sounding triumphant. "They pulled the loan offer. The refinance is dead." I closed my eyes and exhaled. We had stopped the bleeding. My mother wouldn't get her $3 million. She was trapped in the house she was trying to loot. Then, a text message came through. It wasn't from my mother. It wasn't from Claire. It was from an unknown number. But the signature at the bottom made my blood run cold. "Ms. Henderson, the monitoring phase is concluding. The attempt to encumber the primary asset has been noted. The second condition may be met sooner than anyone expected. Hightower." I stared at the screen. The second condition. Mrs. Vance had said it required the death or incapacity of a specific person, or something else, by stopping the money. I hadn't just paused the war, I had accelerated it. I looked at the timeline on my wall. 1991. The birth, 1992. Sylvia, 1995. The house, 2026. The trigger. The trust was waking up, and it was hungry. The email from Ms. Hightower was labeled simply, "Mandatory appearance. Trigger event." It arrived at 6 in the morning. The kind of hour that suggests lawyers don't sleep. They just recharge in their docking stations. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock that same morning. I walked into the conference room at Davis White with Elias Thorne by my side. My mother and Claire were already there. They sat on the opposite side of the long glass table, flanked by two attorneys I didn't recognize, men in pinstripes who looked like they cost more per hour than I made in a month. My mother didn't look at me. She was studying the grain of the table, her face a mask of bored irritation. Claire looked pale, her eyes darting between the door and her phone. Ms. Hightower entered. She didn't carry a briefcase this time. She carried a single, red folder. She sat at the head of the table and placed her hands on the file. "We are here," she began, her voice devoid of inflection, "because the trust has moved from a passive state to an active state. My mother's lawyer, a man with a comb-over that defied gravity, cleared his throat. Objection to the characterization. My client contends that the trust is invalid due to the mental state of the grantor at the time of Ms. Hightower cut him off without looking up. "The validity of the instrument is not up for debate in this room. We are here because the second condition has been met." She opened the folder. As of yesterday afternoon, the firm received a certified death certificate from the state of Vermont. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It stopped in the center, equidistant from my mother and me, the death of Marcus Vance. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. I looked at my mother. The color didn't just drain from her face, it vanished. She looked like she had been struck by a physical blow. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, her hands, resting on the table, curled into claws. "Who is Marcus Vance?" I asked. My mother didn't answer. She was staring at the death certificate as if it were a bomb. Ms. Hightower answered for her. Marcus Vance was the guardian ad litem named in the original sealed schedule of the trust. He was the designated protector of the beneficiary's interests from the maternal line. The maternal line. I looked at Elias. He was scribbling furiously on his notepad. Ms. Hightower continued, "Mr. Vance was also the signatory on the original settlement agreement between Robert Henderson and the Vance family in 1991. His death lifts the confidentiality seal on the trust's origin story." She turned a page. "This trust was not created solely as an estate planning tool. It was created as an instrument of restitution." "Restitution," Elias said. "That means payment for damages." "Correct." "Ms. Hightower said, "The trust was established to repair harm caused by Robert Henderson's actions, specifically, the systemic erasure of a biological lineage." My mother stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. "This is enough," she said. Her voice was shaking, high and thin. "I will not sit here and listen to this slander. Marcus Vance was a blackmailer. He extorted my husband for years. Sit down." "Eleanor," Ms. Hightower said. "It wasn't a request. It was a command." My mother froze. "If you leave this room," Hightower said, "you forfeit your right to contest the reading of the controlling provisions, and you trigger the default judgment clause." My mother slowly sat back down. She looked small. Ms. Hightower turned to me. "Vivian, the trust was built on a premise that your mother has spent 30 years denying. It was built on the fact that you were not an orphan we found. You were a problem they solved. We took a recess. Elias pulled me into a side office. Marcus Vance, he whispered. I searched the name while she was talking. He was a civil rights attorney in the 90s. He handled custody cases. Why would my father need a custody lawyer? I asked. Because someone was fighting for you, Elias said, and they lost. We went back into the room. My mother was drinking water with a trembling hand. Claire was crying silently, wiping her eyes with a tissue. Ms. Hightower produced a new document. It was old, the paper yellowed at the edges. This is a sworn affidavit, dated November 1991, she said. It was signed by Robert Henderson and witnessed by Marcus Vance. She began to read. I, Robert Henderson, acknowledge that the child known as Vivian is my natural-born daughter. I further acknowledge that in order to preserve the integrity of my marriage and the social standing of my wife, Eleanor, I have agreed to legally amend the child's birth records to obscure the identity of her biological mother. I felt the floor tilt. My natural-born daughter. I looked at my mother. She refused to meet my eyes. I further acknowledge, Hightower read, that this trust is established as a guarantee. In exchange for the silence of the biological mother's family, and in exchange for their agreement not to pursue custody, I am placing the majority of my liquid assets into this irrevocable vehicle. These assets are to ensure that the child, though raised in a hostile environment, will ultimately possess the independence her mother cannot provide. Raised in a hostile environment, he knew. He knew before I was even out of diapers that my life in that house would be a war zone. Ms. Hightower looked up. The affidavit continues. I do this under duress, fearing that if I do not comply, my wife, Eleanor, will use her family's political connections to destroy the reputation of Sylvia Moore and ensure the child is placed in state care. Sylvia Moore, the woman in the photo, the woman with the kind eyes and the college ring. My mother spoke. Her voice was venomous. Sylvia was a whore. She spat out. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. She was a graduate student, my mother said, looking at me with pure hatred. She was working on the garden design. She seduced him. She thought she could trap him with a baby. She thought she could take half of everything. So you erased her, I said. We protected the family, she shouted. We took you in. I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. Even though every time I looked at you, I saw her face. Do you have any idea what that was like? To raise the evidence of your husband's betrayal? You didn't raise me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You punished me. You kept me around as a penance. That is what not real family meant. It meant I was the sin you had to live with. It meant you were lucky we didn't leave you in a foster home, she screamed. Claire reached out and touched my mother's arm. Mom, stop, please. My mother shook her off. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. Robert was weak. She hissed. He wanted to play happy family. He wanted to keep his little mistake. So I made a deal. I told him he could keep you, but only if she was gone, only if the record was wiped clean. And the trust? Elias asked. Blood money, she said, to pay off her family. Marcus Vance was her uncle. He threatened to go to the press. So Robert bought him off with a trust fund for the brat. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You are not an heir. Vivian, you are a transaction. The meeting ended in chaos. My mother stormed out. Followed by her lawyers, Claire lingered for a second, looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear, then ran after them. I sat in the chair, staring at the affidavit. I wasn't adopted. I was my father's daughter, and I was the daughter of the woman he loved, or at least, the woman he sacrificed everything to protect. Vivian, Elias said gently, this changes the strategy. How? It proves the hostile intent. It proves your mother has had an adversarial relationship with you since birth. It validates the protection clause of the trust. I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sick. I left the office and walked. I walked for miles. I thought about the timeline. 1991. I am born. November. The deal is struck. Marcus Vance signs the papers. Sylvia disappears from the record. 1992. The photo of Sylvia holding me on the bench. A stolen moment? A goodbye? She died in 2005. I was 14. Did my father know? Did he mourn her? I remembered 2005. That was the year my father started spending hours in the library with the door locked. That was the year the drinking got worse. He knew. That night. Claire came to my apartment. She didn't text first. She just buzzed the intercom. I let her up. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wasn't the perfect Henderson daughter tonight. She was just a scared woman. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped back. She walked into my living room and sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her purse. Mom is in bad shape. Viv, she said. She is drinking. She is saying things. Scary things. Like what? Like she would rather burn the house down than let you have it. I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Why are you here? Claire? She took a deep breath. Because you have to stop. Stop what? Stop the investigation. Stop the lawyers. Vivian, look, I know what you heard today was heavy. I know Mom was cruel, but you have to understand. She is fragile. She built her whole life around being Mrs. Robert Henderson. If this comes out, the affair, the illegitimate child, the payoff, it destroys her. And what about me? I asked, turning to face her. What about my life? I spent 33 years thinking I was defective, thinking I was unlovable. You were loved, Claire insisted. Dad loved you. Dad was a hostage, I said, and Mom was the warden. Claire stood up. She walked over to me. Vivian, please, I am asking you as your sister. Even if we have different mothers, we are sisters. We grew up in the same house. We survived the same dinners. Doesn't that count for something? It counts. I said, then take the settlement. I can get them to up it. 100,000, maybe 2. Take it. Sign the papers, and let Mom keep her dignity. If you push this to a public hearing, you are going to kill her, and I will never forgive you for that. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't fear for my mother. It was fear for herself. If the truth came out, Claire wasn't the golden child anymore. She was the daughter of a woman who had blackmailed her husband into living a lie. You are not afraid she will die. Claire, I said softly, you are afraid she will be exposed, and you are afraid that without the Henderson myth, you are just like me. She slapped me. It was a reflex, fast and sharp. It stung my cheek. She stared at her hand, horrified. Get out. I said, Viv, get out. She ran. The next morning, the package from the discovery request arrived at Elias's office. We had subpoenaed the personal effects of the grantor held by the estate, specifically, the contents of his desk. My mother's lawyers had fought it, but the judge, swayed by the attempted refinance fraud, had granted it. Elias handed me a plastic evidence bag. Inside were the missing pages of the letter, the ones torn from the envelope I found in the coat. I sat down and read them. Trigger the second condition immediately. If you are reading this, and Marcus Vance is gone, you are in danger. Vivian, I need you to know the truth. I loved Sylvia. She was the only time in my life I felt seen. But I was a coward. I was afraid of losing the business. The house, the reputation. Eleanor made it clear that if I left, she would destroy Sylvia. She would sue for alienation of affection. She would bankrupt Sylvia's parents. She would make sure Sylvia never worked in this town again. So I stayed, and I made the deal. I bought your safety with my misery. But I know Eleanor. I know that as soon as I'm in the ground, she will try to reclaim the assets. She will try to rewrite the trust. She will try to leave you with nothing. That is why the trust is designed the way it is. It is not just a bank account. It is a trap. The moment she tries to steal from it, she activates the penalty clause. Read the clause. Vivian, read it and use it. Do not show mercy, because she will show you none. Love, Dad. I handed the letter to Elias. We have the intent, I said, and we have the warning. Elias nodded. He looked grim. We also have the date for the final hearing, next Tuesday. What happens then? The administrator reads the controlling provisions, the unredacted ones, the ones my mother tore out of your copy. Tuesday came with a thunderstorm. The sky was charcoal gray, matching my mood. The hearing was not at the law firm this time. It was at the probate court. We were in a small courtroom, just the lawyers, the family, and a judge who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Ms. Hightower stood at the podium. She looked invincible. My mother sat with her team. She looked heavily medicated. Her eyes were glassy, her movements slow. Claire sat next to her, gripping her hand. Ms. Hightower began, Your Honor, we are here to execute the provisions of the Henderson Family Protection Trust, specifically Article 9, Section C. Proceed, the judge said. Ms. Hightower adjusted her glasses. Article 9, Section C. The successor controller. My mother's lawyer stood up. Objection. There is no successor controller named in the abstracts we were provided. That is because the identity of the successor controller was redacted pending the second condition. Ms. Hightower said calmly. She continued reading. In the event that the primary trustee, Eleanor Henderson, or any acting agent of the estate attempts to dissipate, encumber, or conceal trust assets prior to the full distribution. She paused and looked directly at my mother. Then the primary trustee shall be immediately removed for cause. My mother blinked. Removed? And Hightower continued. All powers of the trust, including the authority to approve distributions, manage real estate assets, and prosecute claims against the estate, shall transfer immediately to the successor controller. Who is it? My mother's lawyer demanded. Who is the controller? Ms. Hightower turned the page. The successor controller shall be the beneficiary, Vivian Henderson. The silence in the room was absolute. Vivian? My mother whispered. Ms. Hightower nodded. Furthermore, Hightower said, under the penalty clause, if the removed trustee is found to have acted in bad faith, such as attempting to refinance the primary residence to extract equity, the successor controller is granted the authority to freeze the personal assets of the removed trustee to recover restitution. I looked at Elias. He nodded. It meant I didn't just own the trust. I owned them. I could freeze my mother's bank accounts. I could evict her from the house. I could do to her exactly what she had tried to do to me. My mother's lawyer was shouting now. This is preposterous. You are giving a 33-year-old woman total control over a multi-million-dollar estate? She is unstable. We have emails proving she is delusional. Your Honor, Elias said, standing up, we have evidence that the delusions were actually factual statements regarding the attempted theft of $3 million by the respondent. The judge banged his gavel. Order. He looked at Ms. Hightower. Is the language clear? It is irrefutable. Your Honor, she said, the grantor anticipated this exact scenario. He designated Vivian Henderson as the ultimate authority in the event of familial betrayal. The judge looked at me. Ms. Henderson, he said, do you understand the powers being vested in you? I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands weren't shaking. I do, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Then the ruling stands. Eleanor Henderson is removed as trustee. Vivian Henderson is appointed successor controller. He banged the gavel. My mother made a sound, a low, animal keen. She slumped forward onto the table. Claire looked at me. Her face was a mask of terror. She knew that the not real family line had just flipped. I walked out of the courtroom. Elias was grinning, trying to shake my hand. But I felt strange. I wasn't happy. I was powerful. And those are two very different things. I walked to the window of the courthouse hallway and looked out at the rain. I had the keys. I had the money. I had the truth. And now, I had a choice. My mother and sister came out of the courtroom. My mother was leaning heavily on Claire. They looked broken. They stopped when they saw me. Vivian, my mother said. Her voice was a rasp. We need to talk. I looked at her. I saw the woman who had erased my mother, the woman who had made me feel like a mistake for 33 years, the woman who had tried to steal my future to pay for her past. Talk to my lawyer, I said, and I walked away, the sound of my heels echoing on the marble floor like the ticking of a clock that had finally run out of time. The conference room at the courthouse was a stark contrast to the plush offices of Davis and White. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the unique, sharp scent of panic. Ms. Hightower sat at the head of the table, her posture rigid, her hands folded over the red file that contained the unredacted truth of my life. To her right sat my mother and Claire, flanked by their legal team, two men who looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were defending a sinking ship. To her left sat Elias and me. My mother looked different today. The icy composure that had defined her for 33 years was cracking. Her makeup was a shade too pale. her lipstick applied with a hand that had clearly trembled. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the file. "We are here to finalize the transition of control," Ms. Hightower announced. Her voice was calm, the voice of a surgeon explaining an amputation. "But before we execute the signature pages, I am required to read the statement of cause into the record." My mother's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, leaned forward. "Is this necessary?" "We are prepared to discuss the settlement." Ms. Hightower ignored him. She put on her glasses and began to read. It was a timeline of betrayal. October 14th, 1991, trust established. November 1st, 1991, Marcus Vance appointed as guardian. June 4th, 2005, Sylvia Moore dies. Grantor Robert Henderson attempts to amend the trust to release funds to the beneficiary, but is blocked by spousal coercion. My mother flinched at the word coercion. Ms. Hightower continued, her voice gaining a steely edge. January 21st, 2026. Grantor dies. January 24th. Eleanor Henderson changes the locks on the primary residence and purges personal effects of the beneficiary. January 26th. Eleanor Henderson instructs counsel to mislead the beneficiary regarding the existence of the trust. February 2nd. Eleanor Henderson, acting as manager of Greenwood Holdings, attempts to encumber the Elm Street property with a $3 million mortgage, with the express intent of dissipating the equity before the trust could assert title. She looked up over her glasses. And finally, February 3rd. Eleanor Henderson disseminates written communication to 52 family members and associates, claiming the beneficiary is mentally unstable and hallucinating. A deliberate attempt to discredit the successor controller and frustrate the administration of the estate. The room was silent. The air felt heavy, pressurized. My mother cleared her throat. It was a wet, ragged sound. "I did what I had to do," she said. Her voice was low, vibrating with suppressed rage. "I was protecting the family name." Vivian was confused. She was grieving. "I was trying to stop her from making a scene." "You were trying to stop her from finding the money," Ms. Hightower corrected. "It is not about the money," my mother snapped, her eyes finally locking onto mine. "It is about blood. Vivian, it is about loyalty. You are my daughter. I raised you. I sat by your bed when you had chickenpox. I drove you to piano lessons. Doesn't that matter? Does a piece of paper written by a guilty man matter more than 30 years of life?" Ms. Hightower didn't let me answer. She answered for me. "Mrs. Henderson. The trust is a legal instrument, not a family debate, and it was written specifically because the grantor did not trust blood to behave ethically." She opened the file to the last page, the page I had never seen, the page my mother had torn out. Article 12, she announced, the beneficiary designation. I held my breath. "The trust names 2 beneficiaries," Ms. Hightower said. "The primary beneficiary is Vivian Henderson, also legally known in the original birth records as Vivian Moore." I felt a jolt. Vivian Moore, and Ms. Hightower continued. "The secondary beneficiary." She turned the document so we could see it. "The secondary beneficiary shall be Claire Henderson." Claire gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Me?" Ms. Hightower nodded. "But there is a condition. The trust states that Claire Henderson shall only receive distributions if she legally separates her financial interests from Eleanor Henderson and formally renounces any role in the management of the Henderson estate." I stared at the paper. Robert Henderson hadn't just built a lifeboat for me. He had built one for Claire, too. He knew that if he died, Eleanor would consume Claire. He knew she would turn Claire into a mini version of herself, a weapon to be used and discarded. The provision was a lifeline. "Leave your mother, and you will be safe." I looked at Claire. She was staring at the document, tears streaming down her face. "He tried to save you," I whispered. "He knew you were trapped, too." Claire looked at our mother, then she looked at me. I didn't know," she stammered. "Mom told me the trust was just for you. She said Dad hated me. She said he left everything to his bastard and nothing to his legitimate daughter. My mother slammed her hand on the table. Shut up. Claire, he didn't hate you. I said to my sister, he was afraid for you. He knew that as long as you were in her orbit, you would never be free. That is why he made the condition. He wanted you to choose. Claire began to shake. It wasn't the polite, silent weeping of a funeral. It was a messy, ugly unraveling. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, a sound that seemed to come from the bottom of her lungs. I did it, she choked out. I did everything she told me. I sent the texts. I posted the pictures. I told everyone you were crazy. Why? I asked gently. Because I didn't want it to be me, Claire whispered. She looked up, her eyes red and raw. You don't know what it is like, Viv, when she is angry. It is like the air leaves the room. I watched her tear you down for 30 years. I knew that if I stepped out of line, just once, she would turn that on me. I was terrified, so I repeated the line. Not real family. I said it to keep her happy. I said it to survive. I felt a surge of anger, hot and bright, but it wasn't at Claire. It was at the woman sitting next to her, the woman who had turned her daughters into soldiers in a war only she wanted to fight. I reached across the table and put my hand on Claire's arm. You don't have to be afraid anymore, I said. Ms. Hightower cleared her throat. Because the second condition has been met, the death of Marcus Vance, and because the penalty clause has been triggered by the attempted refinancing. The trust is now fully active. She looked at my mother. Eleanor Henderson, you are hereby removed as trustee. Control of the assets, including the lien on the Elm Street property and the investment accounts, transfers immediately to the successor controller. My mother's lawyer stood up. We will appeal this. We will tie this up in court for 10 years. You can try, Ms. Hightower said coolly. But under the anti-dissipation clause, the trust is authorized to freeze the personal assets of any former trustee to recover legal costs. If you sue, Mrs. Henderson, Vivian will be paying for her defense with your money. My mother slumped back in her chair. The fight went out of her. She looked suddenly old, her face sagging, the energy draining away into the floor. Fine, she whispered. Take it. Take it all. It is dirty money anyway. It is not dirty, I said. It is an apology. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were cold. Dead things. You want to know the truth. Vivian, you want to know why I said you weren't real family? Yes, I said. It wasn't because I hated you, she said. It wasn't even because I hated Sylvia. Then why? Because you were the only thing in my life I couldn't control. She laughed, a bitter, dry sound. Robert was weak. Claire was obedient. The house, the money, the reputation, I could manage all of it. But you had her eyes. And you had his guilt wrapped around you like a blanket. I knew that if I let you get close, if I let you feel like you belonged, you would get strong. You would start asking questions, and I couldn't have that. So I made you small, she said. I made you feel like a guest in your own home. I made you grateful for scraps. I thought if I kept you hungry for love, you would stay quiet. I never expected you to grow teeth. I stared at her. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. You didn't make me small. Mother, I said, you made me watch, and you made me wait. I turned to Ms. Hightower. Where do we stand? Ms. Hightower opened a final folder. We have two options. Vivian, option A is full enforcement. We evict your mother from the Elm Street house. We seize the accounts. We publish the full terms of the trust, which will make the paternity and the blackmail public record. It will be justice, but it will be a nuclear event. Your family's reputation will be destroyed. And option B? Option B is a settlement. Your mother vacates the house and moves to a smaller property. The trust pays her a modest stipend, enough to live. But not enough to fight. Claire is given her share of the trust immediately, provided she cuts financial ties with your mother. And we seal the record. The truth stays in this room. I looked at the documents. Option A was revenge. It was the burning of the bridges. It was what I had wanted when I found the boxes on the curb. Option B was quiet. It was mercy. Not for her, but for me. If I chose option A, I would spend the next 5 years in court. I would be the scandal daughter in the papers. I would be defined by this fight forever. If I chose option B, I could walk away. I could take the money, take my sister, and leave Eleanor Henderson alone in her empty castle. I looked at Claire. She was watching me, holding her breath. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the wall, defeated but still proud, waiting for the blow. I stood up. I picked up the pen. I am not going to destroy you. Mother, I said, not because you don't deserve it, but because I am not you. I signed option B. I pushed the papers across the table. You can keep the name, I said. You can keep the social standing. You can tell your friends whatever you want about why you are downsizing. I don't care, but the house is mine. The money is mine, and Claire is free. My mother looked at the signature. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say sorry. She just stood up, gathered her purse, and walked out of the room without looking back. Claire stayed. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was tight. Thank you, she whispered. We walked out of the courthouse together. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, washed new. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. Go, I said to Claire. Go home, pack your things. Come to my place tonight. She nodded and walked toward her car. She looked lighter, like a weight had been cut from her shoulders. I stood alone on the sidewalk. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a voicemail I had been avoiding. It was from 3 months ago, from the week before he died. I had seen the notification and ignored it, thinking it was just another request to come to dinner, another half-hearted attempt to bridge the gap. I pressed play. I put the phone to my ear. Vivian. His voice was raspy, tired. I could hear the hum of the library clock in the background. I don't know if I will get the chance to say this. I have been a coward my whole life. I let her run everything because I was afraid of the noise. I was afraid of the truth. He paused. I heard the clink of a glass. But I left you a key, and I left you a map. I hope you never have to use them. I hope she does the right thing. But if she doesn't, if you are listening to this, it means the war has started. Don't let her win, Viv, but don't let her turn you into her either. The trust isn't there to make you rich. It is there to buy your freedom. That is all I ever wanted for you, to be free of us, to be free of the lies. You were never the mistake. You were the only real thing I ever did. Goodbye, kiddo. The message ended. I lowered the phone. The city moved around me. Cars honked. People rushed to lunch. Life went on. I took a deep breath. I felt the cool air fill my lungs. I wasn't Vivian the outcast anymore. I wasn't the secret. I wasn't the not real family. I was Vivian Moore Henderson. And for the first time in 33 years, I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. I put the phone in my pocket. I turned my face to the sun that was just breaking through the clouds, and I walked away. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark corners of family secrets, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed Vivian's fight for truth, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. And tell me in the comments, do you think Vivian made the right choice by showing mercy? Or should she have exposed everything? I can't wait to read your thoughts. Until next time.